Correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, your gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Roll for initiative.
Greetings out there, folks, and welcome to the Roll for Initiative podcast, issue number 13. I am your host, DM Vincent, along with DM Jason and DM Nick. So, guys, tell me, how was your week in gaming this week?
Tiring. I just had my last Hackmaster game last night, and I'm beat. It was when we probably got done about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow, that sounds like a long game. Jason, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, it's been a different week for me. I've been off playing Cthulhu for a while. We took a little bit of a left turn somewhere near Albuquerque, so
Lucky.
it's really interesting. It's my first time playing Cthulhu, and it's a very different approach. I've been learning a lot of things from it. So
wow.
Yes,
It's funny. We were just talking about that last night because I'm trying to get everybody in my group to try something different. And I really love Call of Cthulhu. It's one of my favorite games to run or play. And it's like the anti-D&D game, because everything you did in D&D, you don't do in Call of Cthulhu.
It takes a lot of getting used to some of the rules. The cool thing is we've got a great group of players that have really been getting into it. They all brought lists of 1920s street slang.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Don't you give me the hi-hat.
Oh, jeez. I think I've only played...
told everybody to watch Miller's Crossing a few times.
Miller's Crossing, nice. I think I've only ever played the D20 version of that. I've never played the original Call of Cthulhu, so... But anyway, on to our show tonight. We have a wonderful special guest hosting with us tonight, Mr. Jeff Grubb from TSR's Past. Jeff, how you doing?
We're doing pretty good. And basically, I'm listening to the fact you're playing Cthulhu. That's a big game and very popular in our neck of the woods as well.
Really?
Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We have a semi-regular group of, former and some current Wizard of the Coast employees, TSR employees, that, basically we get together about, once every couple weeks. They're right now going through an Arkham Valley Miskatonic Press's first release for
nice.
a game. And we rotate off on GMs. So we've been running bits and pieces for many years now. And I always say, you scratch a designer, you find a cultist, because because actually a lot of people who design like Dungeons and Dragons enjoy Call of Cthulhu because it's a very different type of game. It's got a lot of the same component parts, but its mindset is the anti-D&D. The creatures are not bags of hit points that you can take down and you know what they are. It's these creepy, strange things that will have this acidic effect on your sanity. So
it's a lot in the game we're playing right now, because our group is mixed up between people who normally play first edition and fourth edition D&D. The first edition players have been doing better with Cthulhu because their first instinct when faced with a monster is usually run away.
Yes. So are you playing an original adventure or or a module?
We went through one of the ones that's in the 6th edition book that's just in the back of that, and right now we're going through a scenario called War Buddy. Which
I've heard of that one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know that one, but this is. Go ahead.
It's getting a lot of getting used to for us, though, because one of the ways that it's kind of anti-D&D is that it's not quite so clear when you've achieved your purpose at the end of the adventure. So that's the toughest adjustment for us, is trying. I mean, especially as we're doing the same thing. We're switching off being the keeper, and it's my turn to be the keeper right now, and. Just trying to make sure that I give these guys some kind of a goal that they're actually clearly going towards.
Well,
the goal is to survive.
Yeah, really.
Or go crazy in the most creative way possible.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, we've had the people who have been dipping down into the low teens of their sanity. And the way the mechanic works, of course, the lower your sanity, the more likely you are going to be losing more sanity.
Yeah, not good.
So it becomes, basically it becomes the idea of how many adventures can you survive, which again is a very non-D&D type of thinking,
Right.
in that D&D is all about, you build your character up and you're going to get more powerful. Here, because of the sanity system, you become less powerful over time and more vulnerable.
Yeah, the ratio for PC death in Call of Cthulhu, I think, is considerably higher.
Yeah.
Well, it's 100%.
More or less.
Yeah.
Eventually, it's 100%.
All right.
And the cool thing is, we're in a golden age right now of a lot of publishers are releasing Call of Cthulhu material. Super Genius Games, Miskatonic Press, a lot of small presses. Pelgrane Press is doing its own game system, another game system entirely called Trail of Cthulhu.
Yeah,
and we played
that
a few weeks. We played that a few weeks ago because we know we're trying to experience, and that's one of those response games where it's trying to fix the pieces that we all feel is broken.
It's based off of the gumshoe
right
mechanic, I guess. So it's a different game mechanic.
I think Ken Hite was the original designer and working on this one. And one of the components they have is that when you get to the end of where you've got all the clues and you've searched the haunted house and you've picked up everything you can, the GM holds up the little sign that says "Scene completed."
And scene.
And scene. And we go on to the next part. The idea is
cut.
Nice.
One of the cool things about Cthulhu is
cool.
that it has a lot of handouts, a lot of here's a ticket, and here's a newspaper article, and often what that creates is sort of this breadcrumbing, so that you're off the scent, you're off the trail when the GM doesn't give you any more handouts for a while.
Well,
you really. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, you have the classic campaign, Mass of Nyarlathotep, which was like the big pioneer in the use of handouts for anything.
Yes.
And I have that, and I hope to run it again someday. It's a fantastic, just campaign going across the globe. Very pulpy, though.
The great thing about. Sorry, I was going to say the great thing about the handouts is when you forget and leave them in your coat or your bag, because my fiance found a business card for the Christian funeral home the other day.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What's this for? I said, well, it's for zombies.
Oh.
One of the things, the original Call of Cthulhu, the short story written by H.P. Lovecraft, is a handout adventure. In that the story is that the protagonist, the narrator, doesn't do anything in the over the course of the story, but he examines the box of his uncle's belongings, and he pulls out all the pieces, and he gets all the handouts, and at the end he realizes he too is doomed, and that's the story. And that is actually what Cthulhu is based off. The Call of Cthulhu game is based off of. Is that same sort of that's its map. Much like a lot of D&D adventures are based off the map, they're based off the dungeon, they're based off. Basically, that's how the framework works within the game. Is you go into the first room and there's an orc and he has a pie, and you go into the second room and there's this, the evil demon and all the rest. And so it's segmented. That's how they do control your pacing. In the Cthulhu, it's all about the handouts because it comes from a different base.
It's funny you mentioned kind of like almost dovetailing into D&D. In my last campaign, I threw in some Lovecraftian elements into my campaign. I don't know if you heard the previous episodes when I did the Saltmarsh series of modules. Yeah, I tweaked them out a little bit and added a few things because primarily deep ones. I added those in as kind of like allies to the Sahuagin. I've been lucky enough.
Okay, I want to stop you right there because I was going nuts listening to that thing. I always pronounce it Sahuagin. So, Jeff,
I'm going to upset both of you. Sahagwin.
Okay.
Sahagwin is the way I have always pronounced it.
I'm with you on that.
It's not even to say that is correct.
Well, who came up with the name?
It first appeared, in one of the original small books. It was in, I want to say Blackmore. I could be wrong.
Okay.
It might be in Eldritch Wizardry. But it was, basically when it came about, I was playing as well. So,
well, did you hear Dave Arneson pronounce it then?
No, I did not.
That would have been.
So how is it pronounced properly? Sahagwin?
Sahagwin is how I have pronounced it and how others I have worked with have pronounced it.
Okay. I'll go with that.
That's not to say that is the correct or original pronunciation.
So we're not sure if it's canon.
Name checking back to Lovecraft again. Back to Call of Cthulhu. We all say Cthulhu, but in one of his letters he says, it's not meant to be pronounced. It sounds more like sneeze with a glottal stop. Cthulhu.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go with Cthulhu just so we know what we're talking about. So,
it's better than trying to say,
Exitachittles. The big
I was just gonna mention that. Those I always call them the evil manta rays. But But in my campaign, like I was talking about, I threw in deep ones because I was lucky enough a few years back to pick up the copy of Deities and Demigods with the Cthulhu mythos and the Melnibonian mythos in it.
Yes.
And also one of the climaxes of the game where they, when they ran the deep ones, they're like, oh great, now what's next? They ran into a Shoggoth, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty good in that respect.
In fact, I mean, like I said, a lot of our design crew over the years have been Cthulhu fans. I was playing in Horror on the Orient Express that Zeb Cook was running.
Oh wow!
And I ran a version of Beyond the Mountains of Madness. And some of our, the current designers, Bruce Cordell, he's brought a lot of Cthulhu madness into 3rd and 4th edition. In the fact that the realm of madness and a lot of the more tentacly bits are definitely Lovecraft inspired.
Now that's interesting because that almost harkens back to the original D&D game where much of the elements seem more like more related to Robert E. Howard stuff. And Robert E. Howard was a contemporary of Lovecraft.
Right.
They corresponded and what have you. He was part of that circle. So, in a way, that kind of all ties in together.
Before there was the internet, there was small press, and there was people writing. There was correspondence.
There was a time before internet.
Lovecraft and Howard and Clark Ashton Smith, who's a favorite of mine, were all part of that, era, and the weird tales that they told found their way into the basis of the fantasy that was, early D&D, where we were picking up everything that they could, get their hands on. Here's some biblical stuff, and here's some mythology stuff, and here's some old, pulp tale stuff. Castle Amber.
Yeah.
One of the early basic, I want to say it was X2.
Yeah, it was for basic. Yeah,
I think it was an early expert. It's heavily based on Clark Ashton Smith's Avion stories.
Yep,
and,
I have that.
I found the stories much later. I played the adventure, and that's really cool. That's really different, and then I found his fiction many years afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually looking. I'm lucky enough to have my Deities and Demigods. I bought it when it first came out before they took the Cthulhu out of it, and it's very beat up now. But yeah, it's got the great intro here about including Clark Ashton Smith, Frank Belknap Long, Robert Bloch, Robert E. Howard, August Derleth. I mean, these books really, besides just playing the game, these early TSR books set me on so many literary paths. As a preteen.
Well, also as a world builder, the whole Cthulhu mythos, that whole shared universe was created through this correspondent and through the stories, in part comes about because they were writing stories for pulp and they didn't think it was going to have a long life, so they were borrowing things back and forth and using references that each other other writers have made in order to create the illusion of reality within their stories. So if one story by one author mentions Tsagwa, and basically Lovecraft might pick that up and then use that as a throwaway line to basically say, oh yes, he learned of the ancient dangers of Tsagwa. So
see, that's the reason. In earlier shows, I think we've talked about Thieves' World because it's one of my favorite settings of all time for exactly that reason.
Yeah,
and yeah.
I've written some stories for the new Thieves World for the revision they did a few years ago. And talking with Lynn Abbey, she always said that you wrote your first Thieves World story for love and your second one for revenge. Because
what somebody else did to your characters, or
exactly. There were like these wars going on, these little battles where you've done this to my character, I'm going to do this to yours. So, and since it was open season where your character was not protected, you weren't the only person who was going to write about it. You got some very interesting stories out of it.
That reminds me of the thing that what happened in the Lovecraft circle of. Cork Ashton Smith, he was made the evil sorcerer Clackashton.
Yes, and there was old Pharaoh Lahav Karaft or something.
Yes. See, some things never change. It all goes through. It's like everybody misses everybody else.
And there's actually, I think it's been part of gaming because a lot of people who play role playing games and even before play board games, are open and they're looking for other types of fiction. In SPI. Wargaming company did a fantasy game called Swords and Sorcery, in which they had a character named You Name It, I Has Read It, based on the mad creator of the Necronomicon. So,
okay.
So
they also had a Gygax Dragonlord in the game. So.
Nice. All right, so Jeff, speaking about Gygax and Gary and writing and history and past, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you first started with TSR back in the long time ago days?
Well, I started playing way back in 1975, first year of college. I had played war games, and I went to Purdue University, and they had a wargaming club, and there was a group of people in the corner, and they didn't have a board. They didn't have any miniatures. They were just, rolling dice and yelling at each other. And I walked over and asked what was going on. They gave me 3 6-sided dice and said, "Here, we need a cleric." And that's how I started playing.
Dreaded, we need a cleric thing.
Yes, yeah, we needed somebody to play the class nobody wanted to play, and that's where it started. And I took it back to Pittsburgh when I on the break, and so I had D&D. I played with D&D crews, and our group got involved with Gen Con. And in part because one of the members of our group's family had a house on Lake Geneva, and we would go up there, stay a few days, and then we'd all go to the convention. So we got involved in the D&D Open, which was run by Bob Blake, and this was just before the RPG came about. And they would run a big 4-day adventure, and at one point, one of my friends basically wasn't impressed with the adventure that year, and he said, we could do better than that. And he said it too close to Bob. And Bob wheeled on his heel and said, "Congratulations, you're writing the Open for next year."
Oh, my God.
We wrote the Open. It was myself, Jeff Liebman, Frank Dickus, and Lenny Lakofka.
Wow.
He was going to do a couple in there as well. So I did not meet Lenny until at the convention itself. But we had corresponded long distance, and we put together a story, and we made it all fit. And on the strength of that, I was hired by TSR. we delivered, and we delivered 8 months early, play tested and everything because we were, young and excited and all this stuff. And we was hired by TSR, worked in the old Hotel Claire. This was about 82 was when I joined up, and my first D&D project was Maze of the Riddling Minotaur. No, Maze of the Riddling Minotaur. We're talking about first product.
Oh, that's the
the one I missed it. What was it?
Marker modules. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Maze of the Riddling Minotaur. Yes.
And they gave me, and one of the early projects I also did with that one was Monster Manual 2.
Okay, so that was along about the same time then. You were doing both of them?
Mm-hmm. Well, M2, Riddling Minotaur was my first one, along with Burnbush Wells, which was a Boot Hill module, in which Alan Hammock had created a town, and Brian Bloom had created a random encounter table for outside towns, and I was supposed to put them together.
Oh, God.
and I thought we did a good job. We got a Larry Elmore cover, and it really looked good, and it really came off well. But it was a Boot Hill module. So
which one was it? Because I've never seen any Larry Elmore artwork in that setting, so I got to look this up.
You really should. It's a really good piece. It's called Burned Bush Wells, which was the name of Alan's town, and it was BH5.
Okay. Because I wanted to ask you about things like this, when it comes to Boot Hill and Gamma World, because there was, even in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's a few things in there for, converting over, when you felt like falling through a dimension door one day. Did you guys do that very often?
Yeah. Did you do the cross-planar thing?
In my campaign, we did, there was a brief period where everyone was armed with lightsabers, but we speak not of that.
Boy.
And we did a lot of, the little bits and pieces, then the anachronisms that would fall through.
Sure.
I had one player who was slowly building a Volkswagen. Get a piece. That was his goal. So we had
a chariot.
What you got to do then as the DM is give him the last piece and have it be from the wrong year.
Exactly. Oh, but I never threw them into the Old West. So
okay.
Now I got a question on when you were working on Monster Manual 2, how you got involved with that and just putting that together.
Monster Manual 2 was interesting just from the fact that we were in the new building by that time, and we have a whole bunch of monsters here, put them together. And a lot of them, I got these sheaves of paper, of submissions and stuff that, that Gary had done, and it was just, work your way through this. In some cases, I created a few monsters. The Daemons.
What are some of yours?
Okay. Gary did the most of the Daemons, with the exception of the Arcana Daemon, the Chirona and the Chirona Daemon, which were mine. I think there was another one. Oh, there was a Plague Daemon in there too. And it was a case where we said, well, we really need some more Daemons, and what do we have that doesn't fit? What environmental niches aren't covered? And we didn't have a leader Daemon. So that's the Arcana Daemon. This was before his time, and since and supposedly they occupied Hades, so therefore, do we have a Styx devil, a devil for the river Styx, and that became the Chirona Daemons.
Right.
The other one, and I will take the blame for this, is a lot of the Modrons. Yes, I am the one to blame because
I'm not blaming you at all.
Yeah, right.
I always
never used them.
They were
seriously, I have to say I like those a lot because I was a real sci-fi kid, and they kind of spoke to that part for me.
They were your polyhedral dice. It was really easy getting miniatures for them. But the early Modrons, the Monodrones, the Duodrones, etc. I had the full stat list and this is what they do, and this is where they're from, and they've got and this is what they look like, and the Duodrone I got a full stat list and a description, and the third one I get most of the stats, and by the time I got Quadrone I get the name, and it sort of petered out. So carrying it all through, so the upper level really weird ones, those were mine. So
I got the impression with those monsters the creatures, the Modrons.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the plane of Nirvana, correct? If I remember
Yes.
that correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Which became mechanics.
Actually, right.
Mm-hmm.
I got the impression, and I was thinking before it, and I think I was correct thinking now, this is kind of a way also to fleshing out the rest of the planes, because you have all the demons and the devils and
Yes.
the demons and what have you. I'm sure there were players like, what's going on in the non-evil planes of existence? So,
and then we had the Devas,
Mhm.
and
Solar.
the Solar. We had the Planetars.
Yeah.
They were all quasi-angelic in nature.
Mm-hmm.
In my original campaign, I had all the godlings in the upper right-hand corner. This is where you'd have the powerful individuals, good and chaotic, who are not. So they'd be the counterweight for the demons on the other side. But
Right.
one of the reasons we have the planes is as a place where we get where more monsters come from, as opposed to we're filling out the planes. We have all this cool stuff, and where do they come from? And that, I believe, is where the Great Wheel gets its start. We can have demons and devils and a wide variety of creatures, and we saw that of course, because D&D is primarily good aligned. You're a
Right.
hero. People may play anti-heroes or evil characters, but we are primarily going to beat up the bad guys.
Right.
Having a plethora of bad guys makes a lot of sense. So as much more so than having the Planetars, the Archons. I think actually, did I bring those in? That may have been a Manual of the Plains creature when it first appeared, as well. So, in the back of the book.
Well, one of the things that I always thought was really good about the good aligned monsters that showed up in the books is it gave us a lot of ideas. When we were creating our own house ruled things, or because everybody that I knew enjoyed making up a class and those kind of things that you only played with your friends. With the Modrons, we ended up because we were all big fans of Madeleine L'Engle, and so we ended up making up this one called the Tessadron that was actually a fourth dimensional Modron that would change shape all the time because you were seeing different parts of it.
Oh, wow.
Sort of like Flatland, yeah.
Yeah, like Flatland, exactly. So looking at things like like Planetars and Solars and everything else, helped a lot when we were trying to think about how we would create more things of our own.
And also, kind of when you think about it too, is when you have all those other extraplanar creatures like the good aligned ones, it gives you a better sense. It broadens the planes. It gives it a wider scope. It's not just demons and devils there. There are other creatures out there. So it's like if you go to, when you go to Nirvana, it's not just there's nothing there. You have something that you could build upon, like with all the Modrons there. So it makes for a better, broader experience, I think.
Well,
and a lot of what we saw when I was playing the game, and when we were designing, we were giving examples. We were showing this is a way of doing it, and basically very well aware that the players and the GMs are going to take that and take all the chrome off, and they're going to change around stuff and they're going to create anew. But that's part of the process. This is just a nature of what I think makes D&D so accessible for a lot of people. Is that especially the old stuff. Is that people felt permission, in some cases the necessity of changing and altering and building their own systems.
Well, see, that's one of the things that I've always used as an example of why it's so fun to play First Edition, because I call it an open source gaming system, not in the sense just that you see what the rules are, but that there's so much more explanation given in the things that are written, so you understand where somebody was coming from. So you can
and on top of that, it's still, you can take bits and pieces if you want them and use them, or you can leave stuff out, and the whole system still works.
The pluck and play
to an
system.
extent.
Yeah, I usually call it the pluck and play system mostly.
Yeah, people take the pieces that they like. I see that a lot of RPG game design has been, we mentioned this earlier with Cthulhu, this response. I like what you did with this, and this for the game, but I think you're wrong. I'm bringing in a skill system, and we add to the conversation. And basically, people come up with one draft of it, and we had Arduin, as a response in many ways. Basically, we had Tunnels and Trolls.
Yes.
It basically addressed a different type of gaming, and says we like, basically it's very much that response. We always call these games ampersands and alliteration, because they all had two letters with an and in the middle between it. But they were in many ways a response to what they were seeing. D&D laid the groundwork, and then people would come in and say, okay, I like this, and this, and we'll take those parts, and then I want to go in a different direction for it. You again look at Cthulhu itself; it's got basic stats, much like the D&D system, and some of them are generated with D6, some of them are generated with D2 plus a number, some of them are calculated out, and all of that comes out of people trying to, make the system that the D&D system work for them, basically taking the ideas that were first put forward there and then distilling down to their new system.
Yeah, and one of the things by going into the Dungeon Master's Guide and seeing, where Gary had written out, this is the probability curves that, I was using so I could make decisions based on that. Here's why I chose the magic system that I did based on, Jack Vance for this reason. So then somebody could go back and say, you know what, I want to have a points-based magic system, but I understand how he did it, so it gives me a starting point.
Well, there also was a case where we came up and there was a lot of pushing and trying new things within the original system. True Name only exists within one spell. And yet, if you assume that's a truth, that everything has a true name, that changes the world outside of it. Mm-hmm. So I see a lot of, I always say that for the early system, especially for when we went AD&D first edition, there was very much a tendency of we need a mechanic to jump over a pit, and we would take it and we would screw it onto the side and say, no, we need a mechanic for jumping over a flaming pit, and we create a different mechanic to do that.
Well, that was an interesting inside look. I'm actually going to wrap up this segment. We're going to head into Sage Advice because we've had a long intro segment of about 31 minutes now looking at. So I guess the intro should be over.
I never got to ask about the Unearthed Arcana.
Oh, too bad. Let's move on to Sage Advice, guys.
Okay.
Sage Advice.
All right, so we're now in the Sage Advice section. We just stepped through the door into the tunnel into the next segment, as you guys just saw, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I like the decor.
It's very nice. Jason designed it. You like it?
Really? Okay.
Jason, good job. I have to praise you on that.
It's crumbling a bit at the edges.
I like the mosaic myself.
It's very nice.
So, Jason, why don't you tell people how can they contact us? So if they want to get their questions into us or comments.
Well, as everybody knows, we don't use any modern technology, so you can't use telephones, the internet, or anything else. You're going to have to find a... Am I wrong?
You're very wrong.
You can contact us. You can contact us either by going to rfipodcast.com, where you can click on the call button, and we'll actually give you a call that you can leave a message. You can send us an email to rfipodcast@gmail.com. I think we've got another phone number that you can actually call directly. What is that?
206 something. I didn't write it down.
206 something.
Yeah.
Or, of course, you can always send a Pony Express.
Yeah, or you can go on Facebook and join the RFI podcast Facebook, or d20radio.com. Let's not forget about those guys doing their 100th episode. Order 66 doing their 100th episode tonight.
Wow. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually. But we have some emails this week, and we had a voicemail until the system made it, so, I'll just pretend to be the voicemail, and I'll read it, okay? So we have our first letter up from Chris L. He just said he wrote in, he loves our podcast, he has a group of his own, and he's listened to a bunch of a bunch of podcasts, and he has some ideas, and he's from the Pittsburgh area, and,
Well, as long as you're not a Steelers fan, you're good with me.
Bad news.
Who knows? He was talking about maybe a Mad Archmage dungeon as polymorph pets, maybe in a petting zoo. Remember we spoke about that a while back, about the evil creatures and the disenchanters and rust monsters together?
Ah, yes.
Way back in the episode whatever.
Yeah, not too long ago.
That you joined us for the first time, I think.
I believe so. I think that was my first podcast as one of the guests, one of the co-hosts.
And then
he's talking about what?
He's talking about how maybe an evil petting zoo, or
evil petting zoo. I like it.
Yeah, and then we fed you and you stayed, Nick. So.
Oh well. Hey.
I guess it was the beer we left out. Oh, never mind.
I'm cheap. What can I say?
Okay, and then DM Bill wrote in again. Thanks for writing in, Bill, and he praised my comic book guy voice. And matter of fact, it's excellent. And he asked us about: do any of us ever use custom races or classes, or do the official rules exist in First Edition to allow such a thing? I know I've never really used anything custom in my First Edition games whatsoever. Nick, have you?
Well, I haven't created any custom races or classes. I maybe toyed around with the idea, but I was always worried about, am I making something that's going to throw off game balance from everything else?
Yeah, that is important.
Game balance be damned. Game balance be damned.
Well, what have you done, Jason? Damning the balance. Go ahead.
It's not a bad segue from what we were talking about before, actually, because one of the races that I created was one called the Air Lancer, which was created specifically around the Oasis of the White Palms. Am I getting the name right?
Yeah, Oasis of the White Palm. Yeah.
Yeah, based around that, and it was sort of the illusionist to the Paladin's magic user, if you will. It's a sort of a Middle Eastern themed paladin on a Pegasus.
Oh
wow,
yeah.
Cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it can be fun. I mean, we never took it outside of our campaign because it's one of those things everybody in our group understood what they were and they made a lot of sense. But I wouldn't ever take it to a tournament or a convention.
Do you still have the information written down, or?
I do. I do.
You should post it on the website.
Yeah.
But I'm actually interested in hearing from Jeff on this one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's
when
right.
I was playing back in the late 70s, we definitely we created our own races, our own classes. One friend's campaign, we had catmen, and we basically did a whole lot of cat jokes when they were around.
Like off of Red Dwarf.
This is before we saw Red Dwarf. This was more inspired. I don't know. It was more inspired by the Jack Kirby comic books. Do you remember those? Kamandi, the last boy on Earth, and there was the Empire of the Lion Men and the Empire of the Tiger Men, and they were fighting against the Gorilla Men, and that was a piece of it. But we also, picked up all sorts of stuff from Dragon Magazine. The new Dragon Magazine would come out and have Alchemist as an NPC class. And first couple of months, we'd try them as a player character class and see, how they worked. And one of the pieces that's left over there is the Gods for Dragonlance came out of my own personal campaign. We just pulled them up and moved them over.
Oh, wow.
And when I created those gods, we created them with the idea of, we have a fighter god, and we have a magic user god, and we have a druid god, and we have basically set up from that utilitarian nature. And one of the gods we were running alchemists when I created the gods. So Syrian, the Flowing Flame, was an alchemist god. Then we stopped playing alchemists, and they, the guys moved on to something else, but the god stayed. And then we ended up moving it over and becoming part of Dragonlance. So that's the secret origin of Syrian. Wow. Came out of an article. It started all the way back with an article in Dragon Magazine. So we definitely had no fear about experimenting. And if something didn't quite work out, say lightsabers with extensive use of critical hit systems, we would say we are closing this door and we are never going back again. So we will not speak.
Yeah, Arduin took over from that area.
And Middle Earth role playing. They've got the most enjoyable to read critical hit tables, but you don't want to suffer under them. Basically you accidentally disembowel yourself. Opponent loses 3 phases, laughing at you.
It sounds like Hackmaster.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's how Yeah, that's how it is. Yeah.
No Hackmaster.
Jeff, how did you handle some of the you're talking about the different races, because by the book, first edition is so biased towards humans.
Yes.
Did you let that get in your way? How did you deal with it?
Early on, it was not necessarily a problem. The fact that an elf magic user couldn't get above 4th level, couldn't get above enchanter, wasn't a problem when people were dying at a regular level method, about level 2.
Yeah.
And the split experience basically gave them the ability to they would fall behind in levels, but they'd have more versatility. So literally our sweet spot was up to about level 10, so there wasn't really a lot of those and by that time, and again with Unearthed Arcana, they raised the rates, they raised the levels up as you go through, that the highest level that a particular elf could be was at this level, unless you had an intelligence of 17, and when we go to a higher level, an intelligence of 18 going to a level higher. So that made life easier for there was enough ways around it that within the rules that allowed them to continue to grow. And so literally when your average game player was, we were 6-7, it was not that much of a hindrance on the character. In fact, for my back in the 70s, one group I was playing, it had too many elves. They were the elf brigade. They wanted to stay together. They would insist on being in the same part of the party. They wouldn't split up. They were the elf brigade because they thought being an elf was the coolest thing, because you could cast spells and fight. So,
well,
so that was very, very different than we look back now and say, oh my goodness, they shouldn't go up in levels. But basically, by the time it got to that point where the average level, the rules themselves had changed. And
so when you were creating, for example, cat people,
mm-hmm.
you probably did you set a level limit on them, or did you just say we're not going to live that long anyway?
It was in another DM's world, so I don't know if he had a level limit. I think he did, but I couldn't tell you what it was, because we didn't get to that point. Even though we were at a point where we had boats and we were sailing around, all over the place. We were commanding our own small armies at that point, but we did not max out.
The last question I'd have on this topic, and then we'll let us move to the next one, is my original point of forget about game balance. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
This is one where you're going to have to pick up the pause.
Pause.
I think the earlier systems were a lot more forgiving because there was so much that could go astray. There were a lot of powerful items floating around, so that a character that had a moderate advantage over the others. And by the time we got to Unearthed Arcana, I thought that actually the sub races had definitely advantages. The non-human races had advantages over the humans, because I always tended to play dwarves because they were the. I'm sorry, I have a phone call coming in. Can we hold for a moment?
We'll pause and return.
Okay, we'll go on to our next email. Simon K. wrote in with a bunch of other people that wrote in this coming to our call, but I'm going to read Simon K. first because he is the first person that wrote in. In number 11, we asked about paladins and who they can adventure with. Remember that, Nick?
Yes, when we were talking about the whole, the possibilities of interrogations and such. Yes.
Yeah. So he and a bunch of other people came to the call and directed us to page 24 of the player's handbook and said they can associate with neutrals only on a single expedition basis, and only if that expedition furthers the cause of lawful good.
Okay.
So I guess apparently the paladin I was playing shouldn't have been associating with those people in that group for that long amount of time. Maybe if it would have been a good idea to maybe step out for a while, or I don't know.
Well, also, a DM call, whatever he sees fit.
Yeah, it's also just, I also believe in the philosophy of, it's a game, who the hell cares, it's your game, here's the book, I don't care, throw it on the ground. Not to disrespect you guys who wrote the book, Jeff, but...
It's okay.
What do you think about that situation?
the idea of, we hit that level as well, because early on it wasn't just a question of interrogation. It was, can we have the paladin in a party with a thief?
Yeah.
Because, we took the paladin as being the, ultimate lawful good, and the thief from the name being inherently, and the alignments being neutral at best. I think we opened the door to a good chaotic after a while. There was some, okay, I guess that's okay. For as far as paladins, on a one-shot basis, what it evolved to be is that paladins tended to end up toward the leadership end. Of the party, in the fact that this particular line tended to drive it in that direction, in that since it's for the benefit of lawful good, well, if the paladin is the one who's going out and finding the jobs, and they are all beneficial to the greater good of the community, and they have a reward in the fact that the monsters are going to be dropping treasure, the thieves are pretty good with that. They were willing to go along with that. So that we ended up with a lot of both campaigns, my home campaign and my college campaign.
Sense.
We had paladins who moved to a leadership position, in part because if they could not by nature we're going into the dungeon and kill some monsters. They tended to infuse more of a sense of purpose into the campaign, and as a result, they rose to becoming the people who tended to make those long-term decisions.
And Jeff, I think you're hitting on a good point there, and I think I've experienced the same thing too through my gaming experience, that that particular class, and probably the Cavalier to a certain degree, it seems that for some reason that class or classes, and I think even Rangers too, can fall into that as well. It seems like those three classes, the players seem to make a more of a leadership role for themselves.
Really?
Right.
Because of their alignment.
You really think a ranger be thrown in there too? I don't never really put a ranger in the leader category, because usually we just use them as scouts most of the time.
Well, I've been in that. I played a ranger in my friend Jeff's campaign, and I was playing a half-elf ranger cleric, and he was pretty much the leader of the party.
Right.
And
when you get to a certain level with the old school ranger, he was the party. Because we get to all his followers would show up.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And they outnumber the rest of the group.
And ironically enough, the rest of the party was either neutral or evil aligned, and I was the only guy in the group. So I was wondering, maybe they wanted me in front of them so they could all stab me in the back. So that's why I made a second character, in case they killed him. But I think you're right on that. It seems like paladins and cavaliers, to a lesser degree, they tend to fall in that leadership category because of their motivations and how the people play them.
I really like the cavalier class because, simple the fact, it's like a paladin almost, but then you can always have that lawful evil cavalier. So.
Yeah,
and again, I think it's a response to the fact of the paladin himself carries a lot of baggage. Yeah. The cavalier has his own framework, but slightly less so. So basically, he's a more accessible character as far as that's concerned.
He's the more of the archetypical knight.
Mm-hmm. I did hate the whole "there's a dragon, he has to go charging into it" thing, but
Yeah.
Well, hey.
Were you the one that wrote that into that class, or
what into
the cavalier?
The Cavalier?
Did you work on that mostly, or was that one?
Yeah, I did work on that, and if it's there, if I did not write it, I approved it.
Okay.
How's that for taking responsibility?
Hey, I like that class.
Mm-hmm. I do too. I just, that's the one complaint they have about, it's a dragon, I must charge into battle now. It's like, oh great, there goes the Cavalier.
Yeah, you saw in the Unearthed Arcana classes a lot more societal type of influence as well, that later on would get devolved into, like, the kits would have more of that, but that, like, the barbarian and magic.
Yeah.
It was tough to have the barbarian just say, no, I don't want to roll on the magic. If I get a roll, I will roll for treasure, and if it's magic, I will destroy it, because it's I'm a barbarian, and that is bad.
The barbarian, yes.
Okay, and Jason, what do you think about the whole situation of the paladin? I'm sorry, the paladin. Yeah, pretty much in the lawful good.
Well, I don't know. What's the question?
Were you alive or no? I'm kidding.
Well, hopefully my mic is working again. So
It is.
We had a little bit of a problem there. I was just enjoying the conversation you guys were having on that and thinking about. I guess I'd never really thought of the classes in terms of who falls naturally into leadership roles or otherwise, and I was trying to imagine different classes in my mind being in a leadership role. For example, I could never imagine a magic user in a leadership role in a party.
Yeah.
Just by their very nature. But a barbarian, that's a pretty interesting one, especially if there is a magic user that teams up with the party at some point, while the barbarian's actually being the leader.
Yeah.
That's scary.
That's like how all the people treated Aquaman in the comic book. Why don't you just go talk to some fish? Kind of like that, yeah.
And we've had groups where the wizard has been in charge, but it has a different vibe to it because they're never quite sure what the wizard's up to.
Yeah.
It's just like the paladin also has that advantage of being a fair broker. He basically is going to find out what's going on and then share it with you. Whereas the wizard, he might leave some pieces out for as far as the archetype is concerned.
And if a thief's probably somehow getting in charge of the party, he's getting people killed.
Yeah. Well, it's the running gag that you don't let the thief keep the party treasury.
Right.
And we haven't mentioned the cleric yet. In the old system, the keeping the cleric alive was this was your health line. So the idea of if he was going to leave, he was going to leave from the back of the pack because no, don't go in.
Well, it's interesting because if I think about the different fantasy literature, and which is a way that I usually think about how people are going to act in them, I can think of almost nothing where a clerical type is the protagonist or the hero, and even for wizards, for magic users. In fantasy literature, there's always something just a little bit sinister and dark that seems to be at their heart. The only exception I can really think of is like John Belair's, with like the Face and the Frost. His wizards were great. They were just like laughable, kind of fun, old.
And Vance's wizards, especially the high level ones. Where basically his stories were basically consisting of why you can't cast that spell that you want to cast that will solve.
Jason loves Vance stuff. Let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
Jason loves Vance.
He's a Vance fanboy.
Yeah, proud of
good
it.
stuff.
It's great stuff. I mean, and as far away from John Belair as I think you can possibly get. Mm-hmm. And I love them both. These are great authors.
Excellent.
But yes, the mage, the wizard tends to come with Merlin, Gandalf, in the support group area. Mm-hmm. They're basically the advisor. They're not the king themselves. And the king always comes from the warriors.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that, and I think that's one reason you're seeing the sword wielders tend to become the leadership position because our archetypes are laid out like that.
Yeah.
Can anybody think of a fantasy literature example of a clerical type being the protagonist?
Wasn't there a series, the Cleric
Quintet?
Yeah.
Salvatore. Yes.
Yeah.
That's come back a couple of times, but that's been a clerical protagonist, but not necessarily not necessarily that leadership role.
Right.
So.
All right, we have one more letter here, and it's from Sieg from the Dragon's Foot forums.
Hello.
Yes, hi Mike.
Hey, Sieg.
Mike wrote in, and he answered our call about the Frost Golem, because I think the last Golem, we had asked about if there was a Frost Golem, and we were all kind of like, and he sent it to me, so I posted it up on our site if you want to go check it out. Or if
I saw that. It's very cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. He also talked about the show, and he actually sent a voicemail, which, like I said, the system ate. You can blame it on me. Sorry. I asked him to do it again, but he didn't have time, and I understand everybody's busy, so maybe next time. But he actually asked about the old bumpers that we did on the show, that when I was editing the show we used, and now we have new ones that sound like they could fit into any show. He said that he wants the old ones back. I said, well, what are you going to do?
Well, I would kind of repeat that if anybody wants to, join in and help out with producing, because there's so many different pieces to making this show that take time, love to, have volunteers step up, definitely.
Please, we need your help and support.
So if you do want to become a producer of the show or an editor, you can contact us, rfistaff@gmail.com, and we'll talk about it. We'll see how it goes, and maybe we'll give you a shot, do a segment or two, and see how it happens, and we'll work from there. He also said he wants to hear more from me because other people talk a little too much.
Okay, I'll shut up.
I don't know who he's talking about. As it's total silence right now.
What?
Yeah, right?
Crickets chirping.
Crick. So anyway, Nick, didn't you have something you wanted to discuss today on today's show?
Well, let's see here. Oh, yes.
Something to do with another podcast? Or?
Well, yeah.
Oh, no, are you talking about PA?
Yes, about Penny Arcade.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry.
Yes, that thing.
Hey, now, first of all, before we go into it, I just want to say right off the outset, I read the comic all the time. I follow the thing. I've never been to PAX. I think these guys are great. And they recently, and just to give a little setup, because I know it sounds like Nick's about to give the hi-hat.
Yeah, really.
I'm going to let loose with both barrels here real quick.
These guys, sometime in the recent past year or two, started playing Dungeons and Dragons, or 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Ooh.
And God bless them. Anything that reminds people that there's real gaming that takes some work and imagination to get into, wonderful. And so, in a recent posting, article, whatever you want to call it, I think it was Tycho. It might have been the other guy said that
The other guy.
It was Gabe. Yeah.
Okay. Gabe said that they had tried some OD&D. So now, keep in mind, we're 1st edition. We're not OD&D, but whatever. It's all spirit.
I think it still pertains.
It pertains.
We're still
and I
the
was really
protectors.
impressed to see that he went ahead and he came up with a way for their 4th edition players to be transported back in time, and as long as they went back several centuries. And I think, by the way, I think they are playing in Forgotten Realms. So Jeff, you can jump in here. But
Okay.
they were transported back in time, and not only were they transported back in time in the game world, but also in the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So, great idea, and I will step aside.
And Nick, here is your box.
Hold on. That's me getting up on my soapbox.
Okay.
Right. I read through the article. I kept an open mind about it, and Gabe did use one of the old school, the OSR stuff that's been coming out recently. He used the Swords and Wizardry rule set
Yeah, right.
to do this,
He did.
and I read through it, but at the end of it all, I felt like Gabe totally missed the point about old school gaming.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of got that too.
Like if I could use a quote here
Go ahead. Quote it.
from it.
We'll post up this link to this article on our website as well so people can read along.
The idea is to have a lot of fun without anyone getting hurt. Okay. Or things like all the twists of old school gaming, but minus the freedom and danger. Things
Now
like
you
that.
got to keep in mind.
Oh, hold on here.
No,
Hold
Jason-
on.
Video game.
Jason,
They
he's
play video.
Hold on.
he's on the soapbox, Jason. Step down. Step
Okay.
down.
That's therein lies the problem. Now, I don't think he understands that part of, pencil and paper role playing is there is freedom and danger, and people do get hurt.
Right.
Your players, the characters do die. That's whole part of it, and
Not in 4th.
you accept it, and that's just part of the whole thing. And like what he's saying here is the only way he can have fun is if it's like totally safe and there's no freedom. and there's no danger. It's like he's saying it's like the antithesis of what we ever.
I'm reading over his piece right now, and it sounds like he's saying he's running OD&D, but it is, but he's making it more humane. And we were joking earlier in this cast about, basically we didn't worry about level limits kicking in because no one was reaching those levels.
Right.
Exactly.
So the idea for his gaming group is and this is what you're quoting is like the letter he sent out to his players, reassuring them that he is not going to smash them dead, just because they're playing in an original D&D world.
Well, I always took the first edition as when you gained a level, that was something big. It wasn't like how it is today. Right. You gained a level, it's like, woohoo! Let me go find my next.
Holy cow! I survived.
Yeah, it's like I survived another level. I should be proud of myself. I just gained 10 billion experience points to get to the next level, and I should be rewarded with this and that. Not just you gained 1,000 experience points. Oh, level 2, yay!
So, when he used his
1,200 if you were a thief.
Yeah, right.
and when Gabe used his example of comparing what they're doing now and what was going on between when you go and watch Civil War reenactors with a bunch of cantankerous old guys. I don't know if that's sarcasm or if he's actually believes that.
I think that came out of a genuine but misguided, in my opinion, idea that somehow there's been some sort of evolution, positive evolution of the game. And, this is probably as good a point as any to have Jeff on because, my viewpoint is that no, actually there hasn't been a positive evolution of the game, that, there was a place where fixing certain things was appropriate, and it's reached the point now where essentially it was either turn it into a video game or no one's going to play anymore.
And I agree, and that's where the standpoint I'm coming from too, Jason, on this. Exactly. So, Jeff,
Jeff?
Well, yeah, Jeff was worked on.
Jeff, what do you think?
I'd read this earlier as well, and earlier on I was talking about how design is conversation, and how we have gotten to this point of the current 4th edition through the various points of, well, how do we fix this game? Just starting from the original, 3 little books and, chainmail if you can get it, and, evolving through the hardbacks and 2nd edition and 3rd, etc. is always that ongoing discussion of what do we like about the game, what don't we like about the game, how can we make that game more accessible or easy or containable, or all the different, what you see is we apply different values to it as we move forward. I like the idea that he's sending him back to an original D&D universe, and basically being able to compare and contrast it. Though it sounds like he's trying to make it, again, more survivable, because yes, 4th edition is more survivable than original. So is 2nd edition and 3rd edition, and and we have, the game has grown. Back in original D&D at 10th level, that we joked about, you'd run into a guy with a motorcycle jacket in the game, and in the back in silver in platinum studs that would spell out 10th level lords, because that 10th level was just incredibly high level for this group. So there is a evolution for the game. One thing, and I think it came out of this discussion, was talking with somebody else, the idea of doing as a celebration type of thing, doing a time-spanned dungeon where you do the first over the course of a convention, where you do the first one in original D&D stats, and you do the second one in 1st edition AD&D 1st edition, and 2nd edition, 3rd edition, and 4th edition, and you basically have it in the same dungeon, evolving over time, and you're basically facing the creatures as you move forward through the various editions. And that would be, that'd be really interesting, but it would be a challenge for the players, because
it'd be a challenge for the DM.
Yeah.
So is this the numbers go down? Is this the armor class goes down, or is this the armor class has a table, or is this the armor class has Thicko, or or armor class is one of 4 armor classes? And
I mean, I got to say, in with all of this, I I don't want any of this to come across like I don't like what Wizards of the Coast is doing or anything like that, because the truth is, if Wizards of the Coast wasn't out there pushing 4th edition the way they are, making it the way it was so that a new generation of gamers can relate at that point, that would be a lot less ecosystem for the rest of the game systems to, orbit around.
Well,
that is true.
I have to thank.
I'm going to throw something out that's throw a hand grenade into the discussion here, because this is something I've been thinking about. Is that a lot of what we see for old school Renaissance, a lot of looking back at the all these different swords and wizardry being one of them. Game systems that are trying to get back to the spirit and the heart of the original game. We're looking through lenses of all of these editions that we have played before. Played since then, I'm sorry. And so, our vision of the golden age of the Three Little Books is very different than what it was when we were there.
Yeah,
we didn't know we were.
True.
We didn't realize we were in a golden age.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know what? That's a good point.
I was cantankerous even then, though. I mean, when Unearthed Arcana, was published, I was even cantankerous about that at the time. And although I was sure to buy everything, and I still have my Dungeoneer survival guide and all that, I think that even at the time there was a little bit of okay, this is a good improvement. This is maybe I'm not going to use that, but I don't know. I think looking back through those lenses, Maybe this is an example of what you're saying, that I am using the rose-colored glasses. But when I don't think the rose colors, but I think they're affecting how we judge what worked for the original game and what didn't. So we've grown as well. I'm not going to say it's better or worse.
And also I think you're saying, Jeff, is you're looking back on it maybe with a little bit of nostalgia.
Sure. That's one of the cool things about it.
Right. And that's true. And I guess some people, when they say that, they think, well, it's actually, distorting what your view is now of what was actually going on then. Possibly for some, but at least for me, I don't think so. I think I still have the same view of the game as I have now as I did then. So
yeah,
well, it might be a
lot more.
And you probably may have shied away from some of the elements that were more destructive. Grimtooth's Traps, great little series of books of how to kill your characters totally dead. Arduin Grimoire was
Arduin, my gosh,
wonderful. Yeah. The spell that basically turned you totally and irrevocably inside out.
Ow.
It was the parentheses and irrevocably, which was I always thought was hilarious. That was we had killer dungeons in those days, and you go back to the type of things that Gary was writing in Dragon Magazine at that point. He both wanted to see advancement, but also he expressed grave concern about dungeons that were too easy and too tough.
Yeah, the Monty Hall campaigns too.
The killer dungeons. Those were the two poles that most of us, were between.
All right. And funny you mentioned Grimtooth. I fully embrace those now.
Yeah. You see, and I'm too kind-hearted at this point. So.
All right. So that was what that was, and Nick, get off your soapbox now.
Oh, okay. I'm off it now.
Okay. So if they want to contact us at Penny Arcade to discuss this further, they can email us at rfistaff@gmail.com if they have any complaints about what we said, or they just want to comment to us, or they want to come on the show. Whatever.
I was just thinking that would be an interesting discussion.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see what happens from it. They went out there. And
I do want to point out one more thing for the Penny Arcade. We're at their Penny Arcade Expo is out here in Seattle, and has a very strong board gaming and role playing gaming component to it. Because I think in part because of the attention that Tycho and Gabe bring to it. This is just Penny Arcade is just like humongous out here, and the expo is very good. They raise a lot of money for Child's Play, a charity to put games into the hands of kids who need them, and they've been just doing a fantastic job. And I extend that also to what they do for D&D as well. They've got a series of their own podcasts on like the Wizard site.
Yeah.
Where with Will Wheaton.
Oh yeah.
And and the moderator is Chris Perkins, who is one of my who I play games with every Thursday.
Wow.
He's from Wizards of the Coast, and he's one of the designers.
Well, Will Wheaton, if you want to come on the podcast, no.
Okay.
Anyway, that'll wrap that up. Let's head into our feature segment of tonight.
Feature.
Jason.
What?
What is our feature segment of tonight?
Creature or PC death. So our feature tonight
is that politically correct death or?
Yeah, so politically correct death.
Oh, okay.
How does a personal computer die? How does it come back?
Well, you smash it on the ground when it statics up on you.
What's that?
You smash it on the ground when the microphone statics up on you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was me staticking up right now or not.
No.
So we're going to talk about player character death, and with specifically first edition, exactly where death happens, how it comes back, and kind of how you work that into the game in a game where death is not necessarily final. How does that affect your gameplay and your storylines?
Complete utter silence.
Great.
Well,
so
I'm just
moving
trying
on
to
to the next feature.
No. Well, all right. I'll jump into this.
Okay.
I'll start it
Well,
off.
let's start with the basic mechanics.
Yeah. That's good.
All right, where can we find the basic mechanics?
There's probably a book or something.
Yeah, I don't know. DM Judge, I don't know what it's called. Anyway, 0 hit points. What happens then?
Well, if I remember correctly, 0 hit points. You fall unconscious.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
I believe the book does say that anything below 0, you're considered death or dying.
Right.
Dying
below 0.
Dying.
And then -10 would be considered death.
Right.
Right. I mean, our game we play that you're continuing to lose a hit point. I think it's every round. As you're continuing to die unless you can be stabilized and then brought back up above hit points, and that's in our campaign a very major event, because if you die, you're going to have to, or even if you drop below hit points and come back up, you're going to have to spend a lot of time regaining your strength. Your constitution is knocked down to practically nothing during that time of recuperation, etc.
Now.
Yeah.
In DMG, now this is on page 82 of it, and I'll kind of read out of here.
Go ahead.
Because this is what I cover. And again, page 82. When a creature is brought to 0 hit points, optionally as low as -3 hit points, if from the same blow, which is brought to a total of 0, it is unconscious. In each of the next succeeding rounds, 1 additional negative point will be lost until -10 is reached, and the creature dies.
Right.
Let's see. Such loss and death are caused from bleeding, shock, convulsions, what have you. It ceases immediately on or any round a friendly creature administers aid to the unconscious one. Aid consists of binding wounds, respiration, getting a healing potion.
Right.
Now, it does say any character brought to 0 or fewer hit points and then revived will remain in a coma for 1 to 6 turns. So, right. So, there's going to be a time when you're from that 0 between -10 maybe, however you play it. And if you're somehow brought back up to 0 or a little bit higher, you're going to be in a coma for at least 10 minutes.
Yeah. I had to...
And you can't do anything, really. You
No.
pretty much sit there and recover.
I had to alter a lot of these rules with my group since we were speaking about the new generation of players, because a couple of the players in the group are MMO players. So the thought of death and having to have to actually wait for your hit points to come back is like a new concept to these people.
Yeah.
So I had to change it around so it was, for my group, that -10 was death, and then it was to roll a system shock to see if they would actually die or not, or stabilize. And then it was, Jason, you spoke about a lot in the past about how the players would go to town and have to heal up for weeks, as the book says, to heal.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to quicken this pace up by saying they'd rest for a couple hours. And things
Well,
like
the way that we've just handled it is that I try to be a little bit more generous as a DM with things like healing potions and scrolls being found in the dungeons.
Yeah, I had to do it as in they rested overnight, and otherwise they'd be sitting there and not want to play.
Especially if you have
the
a
reason
group that's lacking a cleric, you're going to have to do those sorts of things.
Yeah,
Well, I found that the clerics aren't really the medics anyways, because the cleric can't can't memorize enough or pray for enough spells to really take care of a whole party anyhow.
Right.
And the other thing for me, and again, this is my personal approach to the game, is that one of my favorite things about AD&D is that it can be a little bit of a simulation in a sense.
Right.
You know, I tend to make a lot of my decisions as a DM. This is why I said before that I don't really care about game balance, because the real world isn't balanced. So I tend to make my decisions more along the lines of how would it actually work, given a fantasy world that existed. And so, the healing sort of thing, I think it kind of would ruin some of that verite rather than realism. I'll just say verite. If suddenly, the next day you're all better.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but, sometimes you have to do what you have to do to keep the fun rolling along in the game, so.
I guess it just depends on the group. I think I'm with Jason on this. I tend to play a little more realistic when it comes to,
Yeah, you probably play more.
I guess when you get around the area of player character death, and the whole thing surrounding, what happens when I get down to 0 hit points or below, how are we going to treat this? And I tend to be a little more, I guess, a little more by the book and maybe a little bit more realistic in that nature. It's going to take time for someone to recover. But there are, like we all know, there are magical means to maybe get around those sorts of things too. So I do take that into consideration as well.
What do you do, Jeff?
The thing is, going back to my original campaign, we would they would dungeon once a week within game time. And because they would get banged up and come out, and they would want to be able to, heal up. And we had the once a week dungeon, so we would run through several weeks in a single gaming session as they would go down, get banged up, come back up, heal up, go back down. And during the week, there might be some changes to the dungeon, that sort of thing, from what they've done previously. But they became that, that 1 week limit was sort of like, and this was for original, was sort of sacrosanct as far as, keeping them under control. But also, the other thing that this needs is it created the need of the high level cleric in your hometown in order to handle the raises.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Did you guys have this? Have you guys had to deal with this problem?
Well,
raised Ed, yeah.
We're just getting on to that. It was the next bulletin point there about how do they come back? What do you use?
Yeah.
So go on, Jeff. Go ahead.
Well, I have to confess that in our own games, a lot of the issue was sort of skirted by, and now his nephew arrives and inherits all his stuff.
Yes. The surviving character.
Didn't I speak about this? The son of, revenge of, and
yeah.
Anyway.
I confess.
Bad.
Now, I've had the issue of Raised Dead come up in my previous campaign, and it was the Saltmarsh campaign. There was a character. He was playing a dwarf, and he just did the wrong thing. He just waded into a mass of zombies and skeletons and got hacked to pieces, and he died.
Aww.
And he was a key fighter in the group. That's not necessarily too bright, obviously, but
no.
They brought him.
We
back
already
to
said he was a fighter.
Well,
hey, fighters could be smart,
but instead of having them take the character back to Saltmarsh and just saying, okay, here's how much it costs do a Raised Dead spell, boom, you're done, I tried to make it more of a role-playing experience.
That's always fun.
To where they had to approach the patriarch of that particular church where the dwarves are in the town, and they had to do, it was a bit of a quid pro quo thing.
Right.
If we do this, what are you going to do for such and such god? And he did the whole ceremony and everything. And when he came back, he was evil, but he actually changed alignment to, instead of being lawful evil, he changed to lawful neutral because of his resurrection, or being raised dead, and became a follower of that god. So that came a whole role playing experience around the whole raised dead thing.
Okay, interesting. And so let's move on to some house rules now. The only house rule, like I said, like I explained before, was a -10, the system shock for hit points that I use. Nick, what house rules have you put into for hit points and dying and PC deaths?
Well, some of the house rules that I've incorporated, and these might seem kind of harsh, but I think it's realistic. If and I've borrowed from other systems in this regard,
right?
When we played first edition AD&D, I'll incorporate some things from like Hackmaster. And one of the things I like is if you take more than 50% of your hit points in one segment, then you have to make not a system shock roll, but make a save versus death.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
Or fall unconscious.
I think that was a third edition rule. Actually, they did that system save versus fortitude was the whole rule for the third edition.
Yeah, I kind of incorporated a thing.
Yeah,
if you take more than half of your hit points and damage from in that segment from either one or multiple combatants, I said you can make a save versus death, and if you fail, you take the difference between the target number and what you failed by, and that's how many rounds you're unconscious.
Wow.
So that's one of the things I've incorporated. So it makes combat much more interesting. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
And players tend to want to wield two-handed broadswords,
or use missile weapons more often.
Mm-hmm. So Nick, in your campaign, Nick, does that apply to the monsters too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I would do is, they would, it goes both ways. Yeah, it's not just.
This is where I'd like to get Jeff. I'd like to get your perspective on this, because it goes to the whole issue of what it really means to get, take hit point damage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because when I think about taking hit point damage, I look at it from that perspective of you're not actually, you can't literally take more stab wounds to the gut just because you went up a level. It's more about how you manage.
Right. It's the whole idea of the physicality of what the hit point is, and it comes out of the miniatures gaming. It comes out of this idea of basically you're decimating, removing 1 out of 10 of a particular figure. It's counting down in that fashion. So basically, when you compare that to real life, no, you're being beaten up and scarred. So it comes off your luck, your desire to fight. I've always used it as the latter, whereas the idea again, combat is you're not trying to kill him as much as you're trying to convince him to not fight back anymore. Mm-hmm. To defeat them, basically. And so it's a conversation where you're basically saying, and stay down number of times. As opposed to you have the big bundle of hit points that just represents your inherent toughness, but the toughness is a component of that, and we've seen it in a number of the different incarnations of D&D over the years. The fighters have more hit points because they are supposed to be able to stand up to being beaten up better than the wizards.
So really, hit points is like a combination of different factors, not just physical toughness, but there are other things involved with the hit point idea, the concept.
Yeah.
So Nick, to your idea of the save, I think if I was doing a similar house rule, I don't, but this is kind of a neat idea, to say if you take half of your hit points and damage, maybe it's more of a save to see if you're going to just run and just give up.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
But
I mean,
for player
yeah,
characters,
that's one
that
way you
doesn't
can do
work.
it.
Sorry.
Step.
Oh, true. No, you're right. Go ahead.
No, I
Jeff?
mean, that's one way you can do it, but
I didn't mean to talk over, but
That's okay.
But for player characters, that creates the whole, levels that gets into morale, and we've been fooled with some morale systems over the years, and they've never really worked because it takes control out of the player's hands. The players like the idea of being in there, in control. They like to be able to, that my character will do this, and if he chooses to run, it's because he's made that decision as opposed to that he's failed a morale check. And that's a very big difference between the original miniature games, in which you're controlling an army of characters. So if your cavalry, flees off the field, you feel badly, but you don't, take it personally. Whereas the person that represents you fleeing the combat at a critical moment, that's a much more difficult thing to take responsibility for. A fear spell, a confusion spell. Those, players just don't care for those because they're to have those thrown at them because they because it takes that level of control out of their hands. But the players like the idea they'll fight to the last breath because they are heroes.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And that mechanic I use, like I was saying, Jay, obviously that won't work for certain things like, constructs and undead. I mean, they'll just keep on fighting. So it's only for like living creatures.
All right.
It's a good thing to
Go ahead, Jason.
No, I was just saying it's a good thing to remember because, if you do play other systems where hit points become more of a physicality kind of thing. For example, I haven't recently, but I used to play Top Secret. And if any of you guys are, familiar with the Top Secret system, where you're literally keeping track of exactly which part of the body just got damaged and by how much, it's almost like BattleTech.
Yeah, you're right, actually.
It's really important to think about what do these things actually mean when you're making those decisions as the DM.
All right, well, let's hear how you do it, rfistaff@gmail.com, and that'll bring us into another segment, so I'll see you there.
Creature, theater.
So we're stepping into the Creature Feature Theater for tonight. One of our last segments of tonight. So, in the interest of time, we don't want people to sit around for 2 hours listening to our... of course we do, right?
Sure.
We could stay and talk for hours on end, but then Jason would be mad because it'd be such a large file for him to edit, and he'd pull his hair out. And
then he'd kill me.
Yes, he would.
Put me at...
Why just you?
Put me at -5 hit points.
Yeah, haha, -10, and you'd have to roll a system shock, haha.
Yes.
So we have a Lich. What do you do?
So we got a Lich and a Demi-Lich. And
the Demi-Lich was
Jeff,
killed.
Is the Demi-Lich, is that yours?
No, the Demi-Lich showed up first in S1, Tomb of Horrors, Asarak.
Oh,
and
Good old Asarak.
And when I was doing Monster Manual 2, it drove me crazy, of course, because the name Demi-Lich is half a Lich.
Yeah.
Demi is half. It's not a full Lich. So you'd think that a Demi-Lich would be less powerful than a full Lich, and you would be wrong.
Right.
Fatally.
That's your first, which is your very first paragraph here, actually. Yeah. Do you have the listing in front of you? Are you remembering the first paragraph that you wrote in here?
Oh, dear.
Because it actually says, it starts out with Demi-Lich is a misleading term in that one might assume the Demi refers to status.
Right.
However, it refers to the state of the Lich.
I mean, going back to the original, use of the word Lich, it originally was corpse.
Right.
And the Liches, again, we're getting back to Clark Ashton Smith here, because he used the phrase.
In what sense? I don't know the origins of the word.
The idea of it was used as an undead brought back for a purpose, or an undead spellcaster. I think the story is like Empire of the Necromancers, and it was thrown around like a term equivalent of zombie. The Liches basically stir from their tombs and everything. But a lot of the Weird Tale writers, Clark Ashton Smith, Robert Howard, Garner Fox, all did this type of magical eldritch spellcaster who was living beyond his years by the power of his own magic. And this was the Lich that came into the D&D universe.
Yeah, and the Demi-Lich. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah.
Well, the Demi-Lich came about for S1, and I was still I was still playing then, as opposed to designing. So its origins are other than the fact that it was a perfect end monster. I do not know what went into creating the Demi-Lich.
Yeah, the Demi-Lich in itself, I kind of look at it. If not the Demi-Lich, the Lich is probably one of the most perfect protagonists or antagonists you can have.
Oh, yeah.
Antagonists that you can have for a campaign. I mean, just ultimate evil all around. And using the Lich as an antagonist, it's the quintessential evil overlord kind of character.
Yeah.
NPC, and I have unbeknownst to my players in my current campaign, one of the antagonists
is a Lich.
So,
nice.
And they're probably going to find out in a hard way. And ironically enough, I think my next Blackstone's Vault is I'm doing a review of Tomb of Horrors, so you can hear my what I thought of the whole thing. So.
That's awesome. I want to hear that one.
Yeah.
One of the bulletin points I had put on for this was, can you base a campaign around a Lich? Of course you can. It's a perfect example of the big bad guy at the end. I noticed that a reason why I was picking this monster and writing the notes, Nick, in case you were wondering what I was thinking other than what's for dinner tonight and what the next comic book would be, Bill, was why in the 4th edition or 3rd edition was a Lich not a big deal anymore? I always throw this out there. Why aren't these things big deals anymore? Like when we played 1st edition back in the day, it was like, oh, Lich, oh my god, what are we going to... Now it's just like, oh, a Lich, I'll just attack
Well,
it.
yeah, it's like, because, hey, you look on the cleric chart, turning undead, it's at the top.
Yeah. So Jeff, as someone who's written for both 1st and now 4th,
yeah,
what can you tell us about something about the evolution of the Lich and how the players see him now?
Well, it's interesting because the Lich is still a marquee character.
Yeah.
I think that they did the Return to the Tomb of Horrors. In the Forgotten Realms, we have various Liches, rolling around as being, powerful figures who have, the fact they have a phylactery gives them this comeback factor. That you can defeat him, and then you as the DM can bring him back when you see fit. But I'm looking at the original entry for the Lich, and it has these amazing abilities of having the equivalent of +1 plate and +1 shield, or armor class 0, and its dice are 8-sided. And that's something we forget from the past, is the idea that we've upgunned the monsters across the board and the players as we keep evolving the game. The Lich is, I still think, a very potent foe. Yeah. But it's also a much more crowded field now. There are a lot more creatures out there. I think the Lich is very comfortable as a bad guy. The Order of the Stick comic strip uses that as a primary bad guy as well. Yeah. And the fact that it's got that, it's living in the uncanny valley. It was alive, but now is dead. It's powered by hate and magic. It's a very poetic monster that you can basically do a lot with, and you can make it personal in a way that you can't make it with a lot of other more bestial monsters, abominations and the like. You just can't get that sort of mano a mano type of fight at the end where he's manipulating stuff and throwing things at you. He's a good bottom of the dungeon module.
Do you know Rich Burlew from Order of the Stick at all?
No, we haven't met, so not that I know of. So.
Okay, just kind of curious.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan. I've got it, linked off my web and everything, web page and everything. Because
we all do here, I think.
Yeah, I enjoy the comments on all the various versions of D&D going forward.
So
you were mentioning about the phylactery. With the Lich, and I guess with the Demi-Lich you still have a phylactery. When I was doing research on this a little bit more, I immediately remembered an article from Dragon Magazine.
Okay.
And it was your buddy Jeff Leonard Kafka who wrote an article called "Blueprint for a Lich."
Yes.
And I have the issue of the Best of Dragon Volume 2 that's in it, and I read through it, and I got it in front of me here, and it's a great 2-page article, maybe a page and a half, of what you need for someone to become a Lich. And it's just chock full of wonderful information, how that all comes about.
That was a great article. I remember that now that you're speaking.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And there's a lot that a magic user or a dual-class cleric magic user has to go through to even become one. And there's a lot of pitfalls along the way that he can run into. I guess in the preparation of becoming a Lich, if during that time that you're getting everything together, if the character dies and come back, he has to start the whole process all over again.
Yeah.
That's one example I found in there.
What's the? Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. One of the things is that we talk about the traditional, the AD&D First Edition Lich as being at least 18th level magic users. So they're at the top end throwing all the spells to start with.
Yeah.
And then in addition they've got the increased armor. Because of course the downside of any spellcaster is lousy armor, lousy hit dice.
Yeah.
Here we have the good armor. Here we have the good hit die. It's like this reward situation, combining the toughest parts of the fighter and the wizard together. And I think that's one reason they stood up.
Yeah, and it probably, even despite the alignment of the character, probably had some people playing magic users going,
Yeah, really.
High-level mage? Well,
it's neutral bracket evil.
Yeah, and virtually immortal?
Yeah.
I might just go down that road.
All right.
So...
Yeah, everyone really considered it. But let's talk about the Demi-Lich. What was the Demi-Lich? What was the thought process behind that when you were designing that, Jeff? Basically
for the Demi-Lich was taking the main character of Tomb of Horrors and bringing him across into a more broad-based level. In fact, when we did this book, there was some question about whether we should include the Demi-Lich, and because he's such a cool monster at the end of S1, do we want to really let him loose and as a spoiler, where people can encounter the Demi-Lich before they hit it in the adventure itself.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going.
Because part of it, and we should have set up spoilers at the start. Part of the thing for Tomb of Horrors is you're not sure you're going after a Demi-Lich to start with.
Yeah, you don't even know what you're going up against for the most part.
There's a lot of misdirection in that module. There's a lot of it's the first and greatest of the killer dungeons, and part of it is it plays off again and again the sphere of annihilation, the secret doors where secret doors shouldn't be there, and then at the end we have the Demi-Lich there. Yeah, and I
put my copy under my pillow at night to get inspiration.
But
that's why I'm such an evil GM. Tomb of Horrors is like one of my favorite modules of all time.
Yeah. So the question is just how it expands out into the greater, greater play. What more opportunities of what people are going to do to it. But its basics is just there when it was in S1.
Yeah, how much was needed to be, well, no pun intended, fleshed out?
I'm not. I'd have to look at the original at this point, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm really specifically looking at one part in here, and that's about how to harm the skull. And one of the things is a fighter or ranger with a vorpal blade, or a paladin with a vorpal weapon. Do you think that might have been already there in Tomb of Horrors?
I don't know.
And the reason I'm going into that is we brought up the vorpal blade as one of our things a couple of episodes back, and I've always been very interested in how the vorpal blade ended up becoming something that was decapitating, because vorpal was just a word in a Lewis
goes Snicker snack.
Yeah.
Snickers.
Obviously, it has.
I love Snickers. Oh.
Yeah.
Next.
But
Sorry.
I actually have to go back and look at S1, because the idea that you must have a particular type of weapon to go up against this. You got it. Is the vorpal blade in S1? At the end, underneath the write-up for it.
Only a fighter with a vorpal blade, a ranger with a sword of sharpness, +5, or vorpal weapon, or a paladin with the like, or even a +4 weapon can inflict damage upon the skull.
Well, there you go. It's already there.
Unquote.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, are there any vorpal weapons available in the Tomb of Horrors?
Don't even think there are.
No.
That's a very old school sort of thing, and you need to defeat this thing. Something that you don't have when you walk in the door. So
it reminds me a lot of I don't know if anybody here was ever a fan of the Infocom text adventure games.
Oh
but,
yeah.
Yeah,
only because that's the only thing that was available for a while.
But they were great. I mean, I honestly have 2 Apple IIs in my office right now. I have a 2 Plus and a 2E. The 2 Plus is just for looks. The 2E is the powerful one. That's the one I use.
Oh, okay.
But I actually am. I go back and I play Infocom games on that original Apple II still, because they're that good. And one of the things in an Infocom game that's a hallmark of the way they were written is, if you fail to do something right very early on, you could get all the way to the end of the adventure and discover you're missing that one item, and you just forget about it. You've got to start all over.
Hey, Jeff, I quickly glanced through the whole module. The closest thing that would damage it, if he didn't bring it, is in the actual crypt. There's a +4 sword of defending.
Okay.
That would damage the skull. But other than that, that's it. If you bring anything that's +4 or better, or these other weapons, you're out of luck.
All right.
Game over, man. Game over.
Yeah. Good quote.
And by the way, just on a side note, if anybody is interested, all those Infocom games can be played online still. So, you can find them, and really, for everything I say against computer gaming, I take it all back when it comes to well-written text adventures.
Oh, and before I forget, that article, that Blueprint for a Lich, the original article was June 1979. That was issue number 26 of Dragon, or you can find it in the Best of Dragon Volume 2.
Excellent.
So if you want to incorporate something like that in your campaign, it's also just a great read, just to see how, what it takes to be a Lich.
Yeah, it's a great article. I remember reading that. Like, as soon as you brought that up, I was like, oh, I remember reading that as a kid.
Yeah.
I want to be a Lich.
Yeah.
And as Jeff was saying, Order of the Stick, your Zyklon, is it Zyklon? I forget his name.
Yeah.
Even though I read this
Zyklon.
Religiously. I read it religiously, and I can't get names right. But with so many things, Rich Burlew's writing is great inspiration for players, I think, as much as for DMs. Because of the way that he really examines the motivations behind things, and looking at the motivations and the reality behind the Lich that's at the center of that can be pretty instructive.
So, the Lich, what do you do? How do you use it? Email us, rfistaff@gmail.com. So, I think that's going to wrap the show up this week, guys.
Okay, I guess so.
Yeah, couple of end notes. I do want to let everybody know that on the rfipodcast.com website, we do have a new weekly feature called +2 to Save.
Yes.
And we've had 2 articles written so far. They've been really good. One of them, the most recent, is all about how to write an adventure. what goes into it. And everybody, I'd love to have more people go and give that a read, because I found that to be incredibly useful, very well written stuff. So,
I love that we're getting people contributing now. More and more people are coming in. It's wonderful to see that.
I believe we're going to be getting our first comic as well, aren't we, Vince?
Actually, yes. Heather, who's writing the Roll for Initiative webcomic, who's been doing it for about a little over a year and a half, has written based on pretty much her group and playing in the group. It's basically her group around the table, and then she'll jump into the game itself and do some jokes, and it's kind of cute. It's a little anime artistic work. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read most of it or not.
Yeah, I looked at it. I thought it was pretty cool.
It's very anime based. I kind of like it. So
yeah, I do too.
She said she recently had posted up a new one, so we should be seeing it in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I think the new one's up right now, and just total coincidence that we're both called Roll for Initiative. But a nice bit of serendipity as well.
Yeah,
I kind of
serendipity. Nice use of that word.
There is one last thing though that I want to. While we have Jeff on, I think this is an opportunity for our podcast to contribute to Wikipedia. So what I wanted to ask about, because there's a very big citation needed in the Wikipedia entry for Toril. And the line is, in 1987, Abir was added as a prefix so that the world's name was placed at the beginning of an alphabetical encyclopedia. Citation needed. Jeff, is it true?
This is true.
There we go. So
there you have it, folks.
Jason?
There's a little bit more story there.
Ed
originally had a name for the realms, for the setting. He had a name for the continent it was on, Faerun, but he did not have a name for the planet. And again, I mentioned how we liberated the gods of my campaign and sent them over to Dragonlance. We took the name of my campaign, Toril, and we made that the name of the planet that Faerun is on. And when we were doing the original layout, and I wanted the first entry to just happen to be the first to be at the front of the book, so we get that out of the way, and that's how it became Abir Toril. Interestingly enough, in the 4th edition version, they retconned the idea of Abir was a different world entirely that now has merged back with Toril. So that allowed them to redraw a lot of maps.
So, Jason, when you
so there's our very meta moment where possibly the first time that Wikipedia has had a citation put in retroactively through a podcast. Thank you.
Definitely.
Hopefully one of our listeners is a Wikipedia editor and will jump on it as soon as they hear the show.
They tend to lean toward print, though, so that's
I've seen some audio segments listed as citations, so
we shall see.
We
will just transcribe this.
Well, as we take our stroll down Grubb Street with Jeff tonight, Jeff, you want to give us a little plug to your blog and maybe how people can contact you, what you're working on?
I can be contacted through my blog. It's a personal blog called Grubb Street. It's grubbstreet.blogspot.com, and is, sometimes there's stuff about gaming, sometimes there's stuff about collectible quarters, sometimes there's stuff about local politics. It's very much a personal blog, but people are more than welcome to stop by, and I've got a link to get in touch with me there. What my day job is, I'm working for ArenaNet on a MMO called Guild Wars 2, which will have its first novel out at the end of July by myself and Matt Forbeck, which is called Ghosts of Ascalon. It's a fantasy adventure novel, and we're really excited by it. It basically takes place in the space between the original Guild Wars, which came out a while back, and the new game. In addition, I've done things like have an essay coming up in the Family Games, The 100 Best, edited by Jim Lauder, and I serve as a general helper and content editor for Kobold Quarterly, which has declared itself the Switzerland of the Edition Wars. Because it basically goes for 3rd edition, 4th edition, Pathfinder, and whatever else people will contribute to it. So,
Oh, okay.
It's an excellent little magazine that I'd recommend.
Okay, so that is going to wrap our show up, as like I said before. Jeff, thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We're glad having you on the show. I'm just going to sign off saying this is DM Vincent saying keep it original and keep it old school.
Thanks for joining us, Jeff. And this is DM Jason waving goodbye from a small white house in a field with a boarded-up front door.
Aww. Aww.
That's my Infocom reference for everyone.
Roll for initiative.